Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to IT, disaster recovery, crisis management, emergency management, resilience, anything that can help you, your organization, or your community plan for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Today, we're going to talk about something a little bit different. We don't usually get to talk too much about technology and different pieces. So today, we're going to talk about the what did we say there?
Eternal,
The
eternal.
eternal burden of patching. And we're going to be touching on AI, business continuity, roles and responsibilities, and all different aspects here. And today, I'd like to welcome to the show Denny Wan. Denny, welcome.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with your community.
And Denny is joining us from Australia today. So, good morning to you. Hopefully, it's a good day, and your day is starting off well by talking with us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I look forward to this chat.
Now, you and I have sent messages back and forth, so I know who you are and what you do, but we do have listeners and viewers around the globe. Could you take a minute or two and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got into what you do?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Yes, my profession by qualification is risk assurance. Is a fancy way to speak of audit, and I try not to use the A word because it seems boring and somewhat intimidating. Very people wanted to make friends with auditors. But risk assurance, because it's a new black, everyone want to talk about risk, about cyber risk, and how, of course, is business continuity. Cyber risk management is become very topical, and so I like to do that. And you're absolutely right that, in fact, I took advantage of your invitation, as you just made, to your audience to reach out to you their topic they want to share it with your community. And I took on that invitation after watching your chat with Doug Habet. And of course, Doug is a recognized global leader in measuring anything intangible. And where the connection from is that a lot of cyber risk is very intangible because if no news is good news as a success, which is probably true
Hmm.
universally, one maybe do nothing and hitting head in the sand is a good way to achieve the outcome and just hope for the best. And ultimately, and this topic about patching is about that determining that proportionality method. And so I come to you representing a global committee of cyber risk quantification, where Doug's work is recognized as a key enabler. And that framework is called FAIR, FAIR, and stand for not for fairness, as we like
Hmm.
we play with the word, but factor analysis of information risk. And it's about breaking down a risk scenario such as patching to the different factors so that you can have an informed business conversation with the stakeholders to agree on the proportionality method and making something seems to be an eternal burden to do something worthwhile and not futile.
Well, let's start. First of all, welcome to the show, and I'm glad you reached out. And to anybody listening, I really do respond to everything. Denny is an example of that. We got him on the show. So you've mentioned patching now. So let's ask the first obvious question. What is meant by patching?
Patching is the one of the very common and frequently performed system administration tasks where you be draw attention to the availability of a software patch, typically, to be applied to some of your assets, such as your laptop. And of course, the even for people outside the IT industry technology space might have heard of this kind of Patch Tuesday, and it is a cadence Microsoft had introduced probably 10 years ago, almost 10 years now, where each month there's a bunch of patches they released to the global the customer base, and we all probably using some sort of Microsoft product, mostly on a desktop or laptops. And every month, the Tuesday or the second week of every month, that is a patch. So everyone get used to that and don't book your holiday for that second week. Maybe it's not this the way week you're going away. Well, you guess what? You are not going. So what I hope will draw attention to this conversation is for all those patches that you can apply, how you can have a conversation to figure out, the order in which you do perform those tests and the extent which you do. And the last thing I would say is, the joke is, if you have only 3 computers in your network, well, that's not much of a problem. I might just skip lunch. When you have, 300,000 laptop in your fleet, well, that's not such an easy conversation.
Right. So is patching with, we've received these patches from Microsoft. Are they fixing a deficiency in software, or are they filling another hole where cyber criminals could get in, or are they fixing a tiny little bug in maybe a spelling mistake somewhere? What is in these patches? Because I've heard of patches for years, but really, I don't think a lot of people really know what are in these things.
Absolutely, yeah. So let me continue with the Microsoft analogy, because we are likely all had some exposure to Microsoft products. And for Microsoft, for Patch Tuesday, there are actually 2 series of patches. The Patch Tuesday one is what they call quality patches, and it's like fair, it's somewhat, or the way I chose risk assurance is somewhat beautifying the word. And they also have a series of auto patches, which is your updates to your Windows operating systems. They only come probably once a quarter, and but the quality patches is monthly. What the quality patches by and large contained are security patches, not only but mostly are security patches, where the quarterly update are mostly new features introduced. Sometimes it's to also fix not a vulnerability, a deficiency, such as they improve the words and they move the ribbon in Outlook here, and always get very confused every time they release a new version Outlook and say, where is that function on the ribbon? And they just like to think they are smarter and tell you probably rightfully so. But the quality patches is really what I want to focus on is, while Microsoft might beautify the word as quality, which is fixing the bugs they introduced sometimes in the previous patches. And that's really that become the eternal cycle. So yeah, you're right. So the monthly one, the reason they release monthly one is if this is a vulnerability that can be exploited by cyber criminals and other threat actors, well, you don't have the luxury to wait for a quarter. And therefore, this topic is, well, how can you how to be able to manage that burden with the limited resources cyber team we have these days.
Well, that leads me to my next question. Why do I need to even worry about patch management? Because you did give 2 examples of a shop with 1,000 employees versus an office with 3. So if I have an office of 3, why should I be concerned with patch management?
Absolutely, and that's why the beauty of using cloud, because cloud secure, it's scalable. You can sleep well until you realize that, well, when you sign up to, say, Microsoft Azure services, not Office 65, but running your own application infrastructure or Google, well, they have part of the engagement is called responsibility matrix, and that matrix will tell you, and all the cloud provider, Google, Microsoft, everyone have that matrix published and explain that while they're responsible for the physical hardware, and you no longer have the burden of reading, uh, making sure the hardware is still running, you still have the responsibility to managing security, first and foremost, and other quality issues. They are not responsible. So while your Salesforce it go under, which does happen infrequently, less so than say Office 365. Well, you don't have to do anything; they will fix it. But if you run your virtual, Oracle server in Microsoft Azure, which you can, or Google, well, you have to look after the Oracle database environment completely, except for the virtualized hardware. So patching is part of that management responsibility under the metric. So it does create burden
Well,
on the user.
when we say burden, are we saying that it's something that we have to do all the time, or that it's timely? It takes, meaning it takes too much time to do, or it's complex. How is maybe opening a file and just say, yeah, apply patch? How does that become a burden to people? What makes it a burden? Is it just confusing for many, or?
Yeah. So that there are two dimensions. Thank you for the question, because often that is somewhat misunderstood and seems to be over blowout in disproportionate. So the physical effort to apply software package. You're right that you deliver software package, and by and large you launch the package and do most of the rest. However, that does takes time, but the burden come from the decision process and the interdependencies, and one word, testing. And a lot of your audience, of course, very familiar with testing. In B2B context, if only you can perform the recovery without worrying about anything else, my system up and running, well, then life will be so much easier. And when you go to a BCP and you sequence the BCP, the recovery priority, the biggest part is, what about if that particular system are now being, in quote, patched, updated, and perform slightly differently?
Hmm.
Would that still work? Well, I think it will work because it worked for me. That was not the question. Can you test it with us in our team? Well, you can do that. And this is where this patching becomes better. And imagine in a large enterprise, and as before, you have three computers. Well, you have that problem because you just test all the three individual piece of equipment. But when you have a large enterprise, tens of thousands of servers, some are virtual, some are on your data center, the end-to-end coordination. And even large enterprise like AWS, and famously they have the S3. S3 is the storage service that are mounted. And Microsoft, you know, reasonably regularly, probably every 6 months they have an outage. I'll take out Office 65. Even they suffer from that. You can imagine, why would Office 65 be unavailable for a few hours? It's not conceivable with the army of people to look after. This thing happens often is because they sort of, not just patching, but changes introduced to improve the delivery, and things not always worked out as planned.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because I do remember in previous years being in organizations where they do have some sort of an outage or something has occurred, and they have to bring a specific server or system up and running. And I remember during a test, there was a challenge with one of these applications and systems. And the reason was, when everything else came up, it had the latest patch, but this one system with the issue didn't have the latest patch. And so things were out of sync, and we
Mm.
couldn't get everything working until we got our hands on that new patch and had it installed. And I guess that's part of the burden, right?
Absolutely, and I think you play back in real life, often in a physical like situation, and you have supply contracts, and sometimes you only find out through the failure that someone have changed their business process, such as the way they place the order and do a delivery. I change for the better using different carrier to ship, like Amazon had different bunch of driver, and suddenly you find that what you order should be 1 day delivery will turn out to be not 1 day. It turned out to be actually just 1 day it will arrive. And this happens, and it could be devastating if you have a tight supply chain. So testing is really important, and patching often is the cause of these changes because they're regular and people haven't thought about and are not prepared to invest in the extensive testing, and they just really protect themselves according to contract. My testing boundary is up to this point, like BCP is very common, because in the end testing, even you don't make any change, just testing take a lot of effort.
Kind of, they meet the bare minimum.
Yeah, everyone want to do a bare minimum, and thank you for that word, because what's bare minimum to you, according to what your budget set for, is very different from what the others expect that you should do a lot more than what you call bare minimum. And of course, government is the best example. Is we look after, our mission, and people who are at the receiving end of that perspective completely disagree. Their life is completely ruined,
Oh
because
yeah.
they just look after the agencies, and the others say, look, but you are a government, right? Well, no, we are an agency with the government. So if you have a problem with that, go to speak to how to be and ask, why did they give us this budget for agency? It's not a problem. A question we prefer to even entertain to have a conversation.
So
So
what?
yeah, so that's
Go
the
ahead, sorry.
perspective. So the proportionality of patching, and you can now, you start to bring in a lot of BCP narratives, such as, because a lot of your guests, I watched your previous search before, a long time, and not necessarily familiar to everyone. The RTO and RPO, recovery time objective, recovery point objective. Well, this is all about threshold, because the concept is easy understood, and try to convince someone to go with your threshold because reduced your burden and your cost is really very tricky. And therefore, my community that I'm part of, the cyber communication community, is to help to translate particular cyber risk management threshold into a business organization. And we simply put expressing cyber risk as a financial risk. Because when you do that, now you can potentially help you understand what level of budget is proportionate and appropriate.
We're going to touch on a little bit of that later as well. But I wanted to ask one of the questions that we had here is, why do organizations, because you brought up a lot of valid reasons, but why do organizations still find patch management a challenge if it's something that can be done and that they should be doing? Why do they still find it to be a challenge?
Well, one sentence: it's not broken, please don't fix it. Now, let me unpack it and explain. And this is more common than we like to prepare to admit. Uh, Often, when a change is raised, particularly for legacy elements, old technology, you know, hopefully not something like Windows 7. And I'm not joking, a lot of the equipment hard coded, like FPOS terminals and all the most common device you touch in a day-to-day life. They would have hard coded software in the device cannot be updated. So coming to testing, a lot of those elements, like in the IoT space, in industrial control, Internet of Things, like your thermostat in your house, they only tested for a certain combination of version. Like your insurance would say, well, that environment is only tested for, say your thermometer for your fridge, and you have a smart thermometer, you upgrade it. Well, we don't know whether it's reliable. So if you do so, your insurance policy might be not voided, but might be constrained, and you might not be able to make the full claim for the full amount you covered. So a lot of asset owners say, well, the thermometer is still working, but it's vulnerable, right? Your smart TV are now listening to you. We want to patch it. And they say, no, our insurance the contract said you can't touch it unless you test everything end to end. And of course, no one have the appetite nor the money to do end to end. It's not my problem. So let's leave it. So this is really coming back to the statement. A lot of asset owners, for right reasons, that they consider two things. One, that you take down the system means you lose public revenue right off the bat. But that's okay. We can live with that. We can budget for that. But what about you introduce in quote, unexpected features? Let's not call it a bug. And then you only find out after you applied it. Often there's a case you don't know it because you're doing the QA for the vendor. Well, ask Microsoft. You see how many they have every month. They say, well, that patch will address, this new one will be introduced 6 months ago. It happened almost every month. Then the asset owner say, well, it's not broken. Please don't fix it. You can have the budget for the patching. We need, and we understand it's necessary. Can you not do it for that asset? Do anything else, but I will pay for it. Hopefully that put it in some perspective in somewhat, hopefully, more lighthearted way. But it's a real challenge. A lot of cyber defenders, all the cyber defenders, I have this conversation about, helping them to relieve the burden. The biggest challenge they have, you have that informed business conversation with asset owner that said, I know, what I need, and I'm paying for your salary. And I know it's good intention. I agree with that, but it's not broken. Please don't fix it. Fix all the other things, but not
Right.
this really critical asset.
Is it because, and this will be our last question, and we'll take a break. Is it because when we think of patch management or anything that needs to be fixed, the thought is very IT centric. So that part of the challenge is getting people to, I guess, incorporate some sort of a patch management strategy into the organizational culture, and not it's just an IT centric thing.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Paul will go into that further go in the next segment. You here know that patching we have spoken only in the context of software patches. Patching is in fact that is not constrained and confined to only software patches or even hardware replacement. You have a more reliable physical elements you put into the thermostat. But a lot of patching, the most difficult part is process change. The concept is the same. Someone's like consultant, like myself, come in and advise you doing a risk assessment and say, well, you could work smarter because you have better trained people, you have better supply chain assurance. Why don't you reduce some of the step or add some other step of assurance? That change for good intention could have unintended consequence. Case in point is the election in the U.S. coming up, and of course one of the hot topic is electronic voting, and you know how it goes. It is certainly the future, but trying to pull it off in the next election was not as simple as one way thought. So you think about patching the voting process that your country needing to think about. This is a sort of challenge is what do we need to do. And of course, a lot that particular change is technology enabled, but most are not really technology related.
Ah, okay. Well, on that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. We are talking with Denny Wan today about the eternal burden of patch management, and we will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.